Hello, John.
Monica?
And today we're going to talk about a thing that's been abolished in Ireland since 1981 under the Family Law Act of 1981. It's a thing called criminal conversation. So in Ireland, criminal conversation was a civil action which is now abolished, where a husband could sue another man for damages if his wife had committed adultery. This action was based on the idea that if the wife was considered the husband's property and her infidelity constituted damage to his property. Key points about criminal conversation in Ireland, and then I have a whole list of things there to go through. But the thing is, anyway, it was abolished in 1981. I was really surprised to hear about it. There was one notable case in 1807, the Cloncurry case. Lord Cloncurry sued Sir John Bennett Peers for criminal conversation with his wife Eliza and was awarded a substantial sum in 1807 of 20,000 sterling.
That was a lot of money them times.
That's
That
a
it
lot.
certainly was. Where was he in this country? He was, I suppose.
He was in this country, yes.
Aye. And then there was other cases with different individuals. I just wonder were the all Church of Ireland sort of characters because I think Irish people didn't have property of any consequence them times as regards suing anybody because they weren't they persecuted in some ways, discriminated against. So they would be Catholic. So when they wouldn't be adopting the attitude that all these other ones adopted, and it's a strange affair that it was enacted up until 1981, which is relatively recent in some ways. That such a law existed in this country. I think it was a throwback to the British situation because they didn't they regarded women as property or something. That was the British law, and of course, as we got our freedom, we were under that kind of jurisdiction, and so they must have kept that law for some reason. Maybe they didn't spot it or something, but suffice to say that anything to do with the British or these lords and ladies of Leaping. There was one case there in the a jealous wall there in Mullingar, outside Mullingar, near Belvedere Castle or Belvedere, whatever it's called, Belvedere House, a jealous wall, and it was built as a ruined abbey, a Catholic abbey, if you like, to stop his brother, some old lord, being able to see his wife or something, that type of thing. And so, I mean, that was a crazy way to behave in many ways. And this is where money can destroy a person's, what would I call it, giving them no ideas, these wealthy individuals that got land that was belonging to the Irish in the first place.
Yeah, I think, look,
So here he built a jealous wall. So this is the way the scoundrel spent his money.
now the thing is, I think, and I'm reflecting now on my student days living in Dublin in the place in Cabra Park, there might be, I don't agree with the idea of a woman being regarded as a piece of property, of course not, right? Okay.
Oh,
But,
yeah,
but
say, right, likewise, yeah.
okay, and most like-minded and reasonable people would like to think along the same lines as us. But the thing about it was, I do recall living when I was 19 years of age in Cabra Park. And Cabra Park
Yeah.
was full of these men um, living, they had been married, they were in their 50s and 60s. They'd fallen out with the wife. The wife has took the house and they ended up in a bedsit. And a lot of the times, John Malone, please. Okay, this was heartbreak for men and they turned to drink. But the thing is, some of them were thrown out because they were alcoholics, but others were victims of adultery, okay, and they ended up in a bedsit, arse out of their trousers, no money, okay? And Sean Malone, this is not funny,
Correct, correct. You're
okay?
quite right there.
Okay.
I know of
I'm
characters
I'm
that that's
coming
happened to.
I'm coming to the point, and the point I mean is that maybe there should be some kind of recompense when there is a situation where as a man is a victim, okay, and he works his whole life, and his wife has an affair, or vice versa, um, and then he ends up with nothing, and she takes,
That's correct, and he often has to provide provide financial toward as well when he is literally or nothing. assuming he has a job and all the rest of it. And it has happened, and I know individuals that it happened to, quite frankly. And it was the judges had more sympathy for women and none for men in that sort of a situation. Because they could make out that the men were cruel, even if they were great providers and all the rest of it. They would tell lies at the drop of a hat, and so the business of the property kind of cutter stuff. But this was even before 1981, when, as you rightly say, men were turfed out on the slightest pretext, and allegations made against them completely untrue, and that type of thing, and believed by judges. So these are the situations that occurred, and I'm well aware of plenty where it happened. And quite frankly, it was a lack of justice for men at those times. There was a men's organisation formed to look after all these men that suffered in that area. Like most people's sympathy goes towards women in the ordinary course of events. But there was good men suffered as well, because cruelty is often it's not just confined to men. The others can be cruel as well, and very cruel. And getting the sympathy then of the judicial the system, the justice system. And so men suffered, as you rightly say, and I know plenty that happened to, quite frankly. And
So
it was
I think I
not
felt
good.
sorry. I mean, I remember there was one guy called Jimmy, and poor old Jimmy, he ended up, I think he was a sergeant major in the army, and he had the most. I was, as I am now, into writing music. When I was 19, I used
Yeah,
to sit around with my friends as a student writing music, and but Jimmy, his wife had an affair when he was 40, and I only found out this 20 years later when I met him. I asked him, Jimmy, how did you become an
yeah.
alcoholic, And he said that, Ollie, my wife, I had a great job. I was a sergeant in the army, and my wife had an affair. And then I just turned to drink, and my whole life turned upside down, and I ended up in bedsits and getting thrown out of bedsits, and alcoholism took over. And it was a very tragic story, and he was a lovely man. And I can tell you, he had the most beautiful voice, singing voice. Talk about a deep voice, deeper than Presley. He was
Fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. A pity he turned to drink in that sense, because it doesn't solve it. It makes things worse. But I mean, at least he was honest, and it happened, and it does probably happen some. But it's not worth it. The best thing is not to do things like that. To sort of obviously it's a traumatic experience, quite frankly, and very hard to deal with. But I think the only way to deal with it is the word acceptance. I think we mentioned that in some of our videos, that no matter what the situation comes, eventually accept it. And then you're free of this enmity, you're free of this cross in that sense. That's the best way to do it, acceptance. And I think there might be men in that situation as we're talking. And that's one bit of advice I would give them, quite frankly, acceptance. It'll be a while to get over them, and sometimes it can be denied access to their children,
Hmm.
kind of thing, and that type of thing. It can be very bitter, and the man might have been as kind a man and as generous a man as you could wish to meet, but he could be married to the wrong person. That's quite a turn, if you like. And I mean, there are such, and this is the tragedy, and I pity children caught up in that, because it doesn't do them much good to be subject to that type of situation, because cruelty is very bad, and anybody that displays that has that in their DNA and ruins a good man, or well, it that's who it's happening to. It doesn't happen so much the other way. If there's a man that's bitter or that's cruel, well, then a wife is entitled to seek some kind of recompense. And I think she has a good chance of succeeding, because there are such things as cruel men and domineering types. So every situation is different. But it's something that we have to bear in mind, as you rightly say. You pointed out a very true item there. You knew one in particular, but I know several at my age have gone through life, and I've come across quite a few, I'm afraid. Yeah,
This is it, you know. So I think, like, you know, the law criminal conversation, I think it was it had its merits in some significant ways, but unfortunately, as we say, it treated a woman as a piece of property, and that's where it went terribly wrong. I think
yeah,
quite it's quite a complex area of family law to understand all the nuances that go on between a couple and who's to blame and who's not. You know,
yeah.
it's a very difficult thing.
It's yeah. Well, it is, but I know from experience that women get more sympathy in the justice system when there's any kind of apparently a difficulty, and the man could be a good provider, and not alone a good provider, but a goodish man. But if he's unfortunately married to the wrong type, and they have this, what would they call it, this anger in them, or whatever it is, they're able to sort of put on an act. They hoop the man in some way, if you get me drift. They display oftentimes a different consoling sort of an image. And then when the dust is settled and life goes on, then they can turn out to be quite tyrants. And it's worse when it comes that way, because it destroys the marriage, and the children can be affected by it. And generally speaking, it causes them problems later on in life. We see it in countries like in the United States. There's an awful lot of divorces and stuff like that, and children suffer. And it's happened here. It happens wherever that kind of problem occurs. And any children that grows up in a stable family, even if they're not perfect in some ways, but even if it's a stable family, they have a great chance of being settled and what have you. But everybody is different. Funny, you can be in a very stable family as a young person, grow up, and then you can go astray too. It doesn't. Life is very strange. Things can work out not the way you might have planned. But so the great thing in any situation is acceptance. And funny enough, when the Christian TV Ireland gets going, and we get our license for the charity and all the rest of it, there's a lot of work that we need to do in around family life and all the rest of it, and talk to people that have been affected by it, and let not come out with any other of our own views about it, but just let people understand the sorts of situations that occur. So you're very wise to bring up this particular subject, that this business of the 1981 property business of a wife being property. That was wrong too, and I'm surprised it took so long for it to be coming to light. I don't know. I presume only the well-to-do people avail of that. I don't think the ordinary Joe Soaps that was going around didn't have that kind of, what would they call it, knowledge of the bloody law. But I suppose if the sort of the listeners, they'd be getting this advice. But it wouldn't like to go down that road. I don't know what kind of men would go down that road and look for compensation like that. Like the Lord, the fella that in 1807, but I wouldn't mind what they do. As a matter of fact, when I was at the celebrations of St. Albert Plunkett, the Plunkett family was there on Friday, the 4th of July, the wettest day I ever come across in my life. I was drowned because you had to walk a bit here and there. But I met Plunkett's, and met one priest that was a lovely priest in Westminster, and we got on very well. But he had a lovely voice. You were mentioning there that this man that you knew, that was living in bed-sitters and thrown out of me with them.
Not
And
funny,
then he
John
was a
Malone.
lovely singer,
He was a
so
beautiful singer. And
yeah.
he told me one night that he was homeless and I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And he says, um, can I tell you something, Ollie? He says to me. And I said, what, Jimmy? Because I brought him for a pint because I knew that's what he loves. He loves drink, you see? So we're sitting at the bar, okay? And he said to me, I was homeless, he says, in a freezing cold night, he said, um, in November or December, he says, one year. And he says, and you appeared in front of me. I was at the gates of Grange Gorman Mental Hospital, sitting there with a blanket around me, freezing, right? And he said to me, you appeared in front of me as a ghostly figure. And I said, well, Jimmy, I'm not surprised to hear that. And I said, he says, why? And I said, because you've been on my mind for 20 years. I've always wondered what happened to you and what became of you, because I always thought you were a decent human being. And so I
Yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if I did appear. I said to him,
that's a good one, all right. Yeah, it's funny the little stories that come along your way like that. And is Jimmy still with us, or is he gone to his maker?
well, you see, this is the thing. I've tried to track him down, and I think, look, I mean, the last time I met him was 2006, and he was still heavy.
Where was that?
Huh?
Where did you meet him?
I met him in Phibsborough in Dublin. I was walking down the street and I went, Jimmy,
All right.
Jesus. I seen him and I thought, wow, I was so looking forward to seeing, because I hadn't seen him since I was 19. And,
I get there, yeah.
so I
So
met him and we went for a pint, in Hanlon's pub in Dublin. And
I
we,
know, yeah, I know what was in it.
and yeah, I was delighted to see him, but I'd say he's probably not with us anymore because he was pushing on. Like I suppose he was 70 at that point, maybe even more.
Was
So,
he still drinking?
and he was still drinking and he was living in a homeless shelter place. So
God help him, after his life went screwy.
I,
And did
I,
he have
I actually had a lot of sympathy and still do for alcoholics because I started off as a child in the Morning Star cooking for the homeless when I was 9 years of age. So I
good man?
the Morning Star down in what's the name of the street? Is it Brunner Street or something?
Yeah,
Brunter.
I know. Yeah, Morning Star
So
is,
I got a
yeah.
good insight into alcoholics at the age of 9. I used to make them sandwiches every Saturday and Sunday, and I used to chop up the vegetables for their stew.
Lovely. Well, you were doing good work. You were doing good work, Oliver. No question or doubt about it. And it does, isn't it funny what, as you're going through life, what you observe and what you find out. And it really then becomes a very important event in as you go through it. Because when you're doing it, you don't notice it that much when you're doing that. But it's only reflection in tranquility. The poet Wordsworth said poetry was recollection and tranquility, but I think life is recollection and tranquility, that the people you knew and the situations that occurred and the things that you did to help to sort of help those that are gone astray, and we still have them like that, sleeping rough. I subscribe to the Capuchins that look after the homeless, giving them food,
Yeah,
and the Morning Star giving them shelter. You mentioned the Morning Star, giving them shelter and all that, because they're doing good, aren't they? For those, and because we can't all help them ourselves, but I helping them financially that doing this good work.
very good, John Malone. So there we go. It's an interesting one that I came across. It was my niece. She's a great researcher. She brought it to my attention about criminal conversation. We were talking
Yeah,
about
good.
all sorts of things today, and she mentioned that, and I thought, geez, I never heard of that before. So I'll say to John,
No, neither did I. So it shows you what you can learn, and I'm glad now to find out about it and realise that it was a very bad law. But even before that kind of a law, men were in bed sitters have been turfed out, no matter how good they were, because the one that they married become a tyrant
hmm
and all the rest of it, and it give them a bad name and try to destroy them. But when you're out of their clutches, then you can build your life. But he didn't build his life he suffered. He'd a right to have a job to be cured and move somewhere else other than where he'd have reminders.
Yeah.
That'd be the best way to do it, and to sort of start afresh and put it behind him. Don't waste time and don't ruin yourself because of it. So we'll have stuff to say, please God, when we have the Christian TV up and running. It'll take a lot of going to get that going and all the rest of it because we'll be seeking advice from EWTN that started themselves and and they started small. I think they were only on for about 5 hours a day first, but I mean it's now the global. It's global, and a lot of people don't know about it, and I doubt if Claire Colfer knew about that. I gave her a book about St. Oliver Plunkett, and I'm doing it now in my live videos. I started this morning. There it is, the book about it's the 400th anniversary of his birth. And
Okay.
so I've learned a fair bit about St. Oliver Plunkett, and so I have. So we'd be dedicating the Christian TV Ireland to St. Oliver Plunkett and our martyrs that died of starvation in the country. It'll be that. It won't be anything else, and it'll be that, and maybe the Sacred Heart. But Sacred Heart of Jesus. So, but it was certainly St. Oliver Plunkett would be the centre.
No, you're talking. John Malone, I'm going to go because I have things to do, and you have things to
Well, you
do.
have, yeah, you're going to be busy. You have to get your skates on.
I'll have to get my skates
And
on. So
inquired about the business of what's on the go over there. But
we'll talk about that offline.
I just
We'll talk about that offline. Okay, I'll talk to you. I've got to go.
exactly.
Okay, bye bye. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
bye
Bye
now,
bye. Bye bye.
and enjoy the rest of